June 29, 1995. A regular day turned into a nightmare in Seoul, South Korea. The vibrant Sampoong department store, packed with shoppers, suddenly collapsed, causing an intense, deafening roar. In an instant, chaos erupted as the massive structure crumbled, burying hundreds beneath the rubble. The scene was heart-wrenching. Dust filled the air, and desperate cries for help echoed through the debris. What was once a stunning symbol of modernity became a tragic disaster, killing hundreds of innocent people. What went wrong, and who was responsible for this heartbreaking tragedy? In the years leading up to the 1988 Summer Olympics, Seoul experienced a massive development boom. The entire Seoul capital area witnessed a remarkable surge in construction activity, and almost all of these projects were contracted to South Korean companies, as international construction contractors were prohibited from signing contracts for projects in Seoul during that period. Local construction companies were rushing their developments and projects to keep up with the high demand. Amid this boom, the Sampoong Group began constructing the Sampoong department store in 1987 on land in the Seoul district that had previously been a landfill. Originally, the building was planned to be a 4-story residential apartment complex designed and initially constructed by Woosung Construction. However, during the construction process, Lee Joo, who was then an executive at Sampoong Group and later became its chairman, decided to change the building's purpose to a large department store. This significant alteration required drastic modifications to the building's design, including the removal of several support columns to install escalators and the addition of a 5th floor intended initially as a roller skating rink but later converted into a food court. The contractors, Woosung Construction, expressed serious concerns about these structural changes, deeming them unsafe. When they refused to carry out the modifications, Lee Joo fired them and hired his own company to complete the project. Despite considerable structural risks, the construction was rushed to completion, and the department store opened its doors to the public on July 7, 1990. During its 5 years of operation, the Sampoong department store became a popular shopping destination, attracting around 40,000 visitors daily. The store consisted of north and south wings connected by an atrium. However, the building's design flaws were critical. It featured a flat slab construction without crossbeams or a steel skeleton, severely limiting its ability to distribute weight across the floors. To maximize retail space, Lee Joo ordered the floor columns to be reduced from the originally planned 80-centimeter thickness to 60 centimeters. This reduction increased the load on each column because they were spaced 11 meters apart, further compromising the building's structural integrity. Additionally, the 5th-story restaurant floor had an ondel heating system, which involved a thick concrete base containing hot water pipes. This added significant weight and strain to the structure. Moreover, 3 15-ton air conditioning units were installed on the roof, adding even more stress to the already overloaded building. In 1993, due to noise complaints, these heavy air conditioning units were dragged across the roof instead of being lifted properly, causing severe cracks. The units were moved over column 5E, where the most visible cracks appeared before the collapse. These cracks worsened because the columns supporting the 5th floor were not aligned with those on the lower floors, causing improper load distribution through the slabs. In April 1995, concerning cracks began to appear in the ceiling of the Sampoong department store's south wing, particularly on the 5th floor. Rather than addressing these structural issues, Lee Joo and the store's management simply relocated merchandise and stores from the top floor to the basement. By June 29th, the cracks had worsened significantly. Despite this, management only closed parts of the top floor, refraining from shutting down the entire building or issuing formal evacuation orders due to the high number of customers that day and the potential loss in revenue. On the morning of June 29th, civil engineering experts were called in to inspect the building. Their brief inspection revealed a serious risk of collapse. The facilities manager also examined the slab in one of the 5th floor restaurants just hours before the disaster. Despite these warnings, no immediate action was taken to evacuate the building. Around noontime, the first of several loud bangs was heard from the top floors, as the vibrations from the air conditioning units caused the cracks in the slabs to widen further. Customers began to complain about the vibrations, leading to the air conditioning being turned off, but by then, the cracks had already grown to 10 centimeters wide. Realizing that the collapse was imminent, an emergency board meeting was held. Despite the director suggesting that all staff and customers be evacuated, Lee Jun angrily refused, fearing revenue losses. Nevertheless, he and the other executives left the building safely before the collapse occurred. At around 5 p.m., the 5th floor ceiling began to visibly sink. Store workers closed off customer access to the 5th floor, but the rest of the store remained open, filled with hundreds of shoppers. Lee Jun chose not to evacuate the building or initiate repairs during this critical period. By 5:52 p.m., ominous cracking sounds echoed through the building, prompting workers to sound alarms and begin evacuations. However, it was too late. The roof suddenly gave way, causing the heavy air conditioning units to crash into the already overloaded 5th floor. This floor then collapsed onto the lower floors, creating a domino effect. The main columns, weakened due to modifications for escalators, failed under the strain. The building's south wing pancaked into the basement in less than 20 seconds. The catastrophic collapse killed 502 people and trapped over 1,500 others in the rubble, marking one of South Korea's deadliest peacetime disasters. Rescue crews arrived at the scene of the Sampoong department store collapse within minutes. Cranes and other heavy equipment were brought in the next day. However, Seoul's mayor, Choi Pyong-yeol, announced that the rescue operations would be called off due to fears that the remaining structure might collapse further. This decision sparked massive protests, especially from the friends and relatives of those still missing. Yielding to the public outcry, Choi and other officials decided to continue the search for survivors, stabilizing the remaining structure with guy cables. To aid the rescue efforts, Korean Telecom transmitted signals every half hour, designed to trigger cell phones or pagers that trapped survivors might have. After nearly a week, the focus shifted to removing debris, but crews remained careful to check for victims. 2 weeks after the collapse, city officials concluded that anyone still trapped in the building was unlikely to be alive. Despite the sweltering heat, some trapped survivors avoided dehydration by drinking rainwater. Miraculously, 19-year-old store clerk Park Seung-yeon was pulled from the wreckage 17 days after the collapse, suffering only a few scratches. Additionally, 18-year-old Woo Ji-won was rescued after nearly 12 days. One man, saved after 9 days, reported that other trapped survivors had drowned from rain and water used in fire suppression efforts. The collapse resulted in 502 deaths and about 937 injuries, with approximately 1,500 people trapped inside the structure. The rescue attempts spanned many days, leading to the miraculous survival of a few individuals. These efforts, though fraught with challenges and heartbreak, highlighted the resilience and determination of the rescue teams and the hope of those awaiting news of their loved ones. The investigation into the Sampoong department store collapse was led by Professor Chung Lan of Dankook University's Engineering School. Initially, leaking gas was suspected as the cause, but it was soon ruled out as the fires in the rubble came from crushed cars in the underground garage. Fears of a terrorist attack were also dismissed when experts noticed the building collapsed downward without significant debris being thrown outward. The examination of the building's foundation and unstable ground revealed critical flaws. The rubble showed that substandard concrete had been used, mixed with seawater, leading to weak construction. Additionally, the concrete in the ceilings and walls was poorly reinforced. The building had been constructed using the flawed flat slab construction technique, which supports the floor slab directly on columns without beams, lacking adequate structural integrity. The columns, which were supposed to be 80 centimeters in diameter, were only 60 centimeters. Furthermore, the steel reinforcement bars were half the required number, significantly weakening the structure. Fire shields installed around the escalators further reduced the column's diameter, concentrating the load on a smaller area. This combination of substandard materials and flawed design directly contributed to the catastrophic collapse. The final trigger was identified as the movement of the 3 heavy rooftop air conditioning units 2 years before the collapse. Instead of being lifted by cranes, the units were dragged across the roof, causing cracks that worsened over time. The vibrations from the air conditioning units further widened these cracks. On the day of the collapse, even though the units were turned off, the damage was irreversible, leading to the ultimate failure of the structure. During his interrogation, Lee Jun caused public outrage by expressing more concern for his company's financial loss than for the victims of the disaster. He was found guilty of criminal negligence and sentenced to 10.5 years in prison, later reduced to 7.5 years on appeal. Lee Jun passed away in 2003, shortly after his release. His son, Lee Han-sang, received a 7-year sentence for accidental homicide and corruption. Several city officials and store executives were also jailed for their role in the disaster. The collapse led to widespread condemnation and legal consequences for many involved. Compensation for the victims' families totaled 375.8 billion Korean won, with payouts completed by 2003. The Sampoong Group ceased to exist following the disaster, as Lee Jun and his son offered their entire wealth to compensate the victims. After the recovery operations concluded at the Sampoong department store site, the remains of the building were demolished. The site remained vacant until 2000, as the community grappled with the tragedy's aftermath. Families of the victims requested a memorial at the site, but Seoul district government opposed the idea, leading to mediation by the Seoul metropolitan government. Ultimately, the memorial was controversially built elsewhere, and the land was sold to a private developer. Today, the site hosts the luxury Acrovista apartments, constructed between 2001 and 2004. The collapse of the Sampoong department store resulted in critical lessons about building safety, the prioritization of human lives over profit, and the necessity of rigorous structural inspections. The disaster highlighted the harsh consequences of ignoring warning signs and cutting corners in construction practices. It underscored the urgent need for accountability and stricter regulations to prevent such tragedies in the future. This catastrophe still serves as a heartbreaking reminder of the human cost of negligence and corruption. The lessons learned from the Sampoong department store collapse have since influenced construction standards and practices in South Korea, leading to enhanced safety protocols and greater vigilance in building maintenance. The memory of the 502 lives lost in this disaster remains a powerful call to action for better governance and ethical responsibility in the construction industry. If you found this video interesting, please don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another video. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.